The millionaire only dated models until his new employee walked into his office and stole his heart. She never thought a single elevator ride could change everything, but it did. Maya Rodriguez pressed the button for the 45th floor, watching the numbers climb as her heart hammered against her ribs. The glass elevator of Hawthorne Enterprises shot upward through Manhattan's steel and concrete jungle, each floor bringing her closer to a life she'd never imagined possible. 3 months ago, she was changing her grandfather's medication schedule in their cramped Chicago apartment. Now she stood in a designer building that touched the clouds, wearing her only good blazer and carrying a briefcase that had cost her 2 weeks of grocery money. The elevator door slid open with a whisper, revealing a reception area that looked like something from a luxury magazine. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased the city sprawling below, while modern art hung on pristine white walls. Everything screamed money, the kind Maya had only seen in movies. "You must be Maya," said a woman behind the marble reception desk. Her smile was warm but professional. "I'm Delilah, Mr. Hawthorne's scheduling coordinator. He's waiting for you." Maya nodded, her mouth suddenly dry. She'd researched Blake Hawthorne obsessively over the past week. Forbes called him Manhattan's Golden Boy. The Wall Street Journal dubbed him the King of Luxury Development. But every article mentioned the same thing: his legendary collection of supermodel girlfriends and his ice-cold approach to business. Delilah led her through a corridor lined with photographs of gleaming skyscrapers and architectural awards. "Quick tip," she whispered as they walked. "He doesn't like small talk. Stick to business, keep your answers short, and whatever you do, don't mention his personal life." They stopped before massive oak doors. Delilah knocked twice, then opened them without waiting for a response. "Mr. Hawthorne, your new executive assistant is here." Maya stepped inside and felt her breath catch. The office was enormous, with one entire wall made of glass overlooking Central Park. A mahogany desk dominated the space, flanked by leather chairs that probably cost more than her annual rent. But it wasn't the luxury that stopped her cold. It was him. Blake Hawthorne stood with his back to them, silhouetted against the window. Even from behind, he commanded attention. Broad shoulders filling out a charcoal suit, dark hair perfectly styled, posture radiating the kind of confidence that came from never hearing the word no. When he turned around, Maya understood why supermodels lined up for his attention. Sharp jawline, steel gray eyes, features that belonged on magazine covers. But there was something else in those eyes, something cold and calculating that made her straighten her spine instinctively. "Maya Rodriguez," he said, not bothering with pleasantries. His voice was deep, commanding. "Chicago State University, Business Administration. 3 years at Morrison & Associates, 2 years freelance consulting. Impressive references, though your employment history is fragmented." Maya lifted her chin. She'd expected this question. "I cared for my grandfather who had dementia. My priorities were exactly where they needed to be." Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe. Most people apologized when questioned about their resume. "Sit." She took the chair across from his desk, noting how he studied her with the intensity of someone evaluating a business deal. His fingers drummed against the mahogany surface, the only sign that he wasn't as controlled as he appeared. "Your job is simple," he continued. "Manage my schedule, screen my calls, handle correspondence, and coordinate with my department heads. I work long hours. I expect the same from my staff. I don't tolerate mistakes, excuses, or personal drama bleeding into professional space." "Understood." "Good." He slid a thick folder across the desk. "These are the pending contracts for our Tribeca project. I need summaries on my desk by tomorrow morning. Meeting notes are in the blue folder, expense reports in the red. Questions?" Maya glanced at the mountain of paperwork. Any normal person would feel overwhelmed. Instead, she felt energized. After months of uncertainty, she finally had something concrete to sink her teeth into. "Just one," she said, meeting his gaze steadily. "Do you prefer your coffee black, or should I learn your usual order?" For the first time since she'd walked in, Blake Hawthorne looked genuinely surprised. "You don't know? Should I?" A smile ghosted across his lips, so brief she almost missed it. "Black, 2 sugars. And Maya?" He leaned back in his chair, studying her with new interest. "Most people spend their first meeting trying to impress me with how much they know about my personal life. I'm not most people." The words hung in the air between them. Something shifted in his expression, curiosity replacing calculation. For a moment, Maya forgot about the intimidating office and the billionaire reputation. She just saw a man who looked like he'd forgotten what it felt like to be surprised. "No," he said quietly. "I don't think you are." As Maya gathered the folders and stood to leave, she caught him watching her with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. At the door, she turned back. "Mr. Hawthorne, I'll have those summaries ready by 8 a.m. Is there anything else you need?" He was silent for so long she wondered if he'd heard her. Then, almost to himself, he murmured, "I'm not sure yet." But as the oak doors closed behind her, Maya couldn't shake the feeling that everything had just changed, and neither of them was ready for what came next. Maya arrived at 7:47 a.m. with coffee that was still steaming and answers that would shake his world. The Hawthorne Enterprises lobby buzzed with early morning energy as Maya stepped off the elevator, balancing a tray of coffee and a leather portfolio that had seen better days. She'd been awake since 5, poring over contracts in her studio apartment in Queens, taking notes by lamplight while the city slept around her. The Tribeca project wasn't just another development. It was Blake's attempt to revolutionize affordable luxury housing in Manhattan, and the numbers told a story he probably didn't want to hear. Delilah looked up from her computer with surprise. "You're early. He doesn't usually get in until 8:30, I know." Maya had done her homework, but I wanted to review the Peterson and Associates contract one more time before our meeting. "Smart girl." Delilah's smile was genuine this time. "Fair warning, though, he's been here since 6. Something about the downtown zoning committee rejecting our initial proposal. He's not in the best mood." Maya nodded, straightening her blazer. She'd bought it at a consignment shop in Chicago, but it fit well enough to pass in a building where assistants wore Prada. "Thanks for the heads up." The oak doors to Blake's office stood slightly ajar. Maya knocked softly and heard his distracted, "Come in," from inside. She pushed the door open to find him hunched over his desk, tie loosened, sleeves rolled up, surrounded by what looked like architectural blueprints and legal documents. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, like he'd been running his hands through it. "Your coffee," she said, setting the cup on his desk. "And the contract summaries you requested." Blake glanced up, and for a moment, Maya saw exhaustion flicker across his features before his usual composure snapped back into place. "You're early. The Peterson contract had some irregularities I wanted to double-check." She opened her portfolio and pulled out a neat stack of papers. "I've highlighted the concerning clauses in yellow and cross-referenced them with the zoning requirements you're fighting downtown." Something in his expression shifted. He set down his pen and really looked at her for the first time that morning. "Irregularities? Section 12, subsection 4. They're asking for a completion guarantee that's standard for residential projects, but unusual for mixed-use developments like yours. It could leave you liable for delays caused by city permit issues, which, given this morning's zoning rejection, seems particularly relevant." Blake reached for the contract, his fingers brushing hers as he took the papers. The brief contact sent an unexpected jolt through Maya's system, and from the way his eyes widened slightly, she wasn't the only one who felt it. "How did you—" He flipped through the pages, scanning her notes. "This would have cost us millions if the permits get delayed again. I may not have a law degree, but I know how to read the fine print." Maya tucked a strand of dark hair behind her ear, suddenly self-conscious under his intense scrutiny. "I also took the liberty of researching similar projects Peterson and Associates handled in the past 3 years. Their track record with mixed-use developments is concerning." Blake leaned back in his chair, studying her with the same focus he'd probably used to build his empire. Most executive assistants would have just summarized the obvious clauses and called it a day. "I'm not most executive assistants." "No," he said quietly, echoing his words from the day before. "You're definitely not." For a moment, silence stretched between them. Maya became acutely aware of everything. The way morning light streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the faint scent of his cologne mixing with coffee, the fact that Blake Hawthorne was looking at her like she'd just solved a puzzle he'd been working on for years. Her phone buzzed with a text message breaking the spell. Maya glanced at it and felt her heart sink. Grandpa fell again. At ER. Nothing broken but scared. Aunt Carmen Blake must have noticed her expression change. "Problem?" Maya hesitated. Yesterday he'd made it clear that personal drama had no place in his office, but the worry must have shown on her face because his tone softened slightly. "My grandfather," she said finally. He's not well. My aunt just texted from the hospital." She expected him to dismiss her concerns, maybe remind her about professional boundaries. Instead, Blake surprised her again. "Go." "I'm sorry?" "Go to Chicago. Handle whatever you need to handle. He pulled out his phone. I'll have the company jet ready in an hour. Maya stared at him. Mr. Hawthorne, I can't accept. You just saved me millions of dollars with work you did on your own time. His voice was matter-of-fact, but there was something else there. Something that sounded almost like kindness. The jet would just sit in the hangar anyway. She struggled for words. Thank you. I'll work remotely and… Maya. The way he said her name made her look up. Just take care of your family. The contracts will still be here when you get back. As she gathered her things, Blake called out one more time. Maya? That coffee was perfect. She smiled, despite everything. Just black, 2 sugars. Nothing complicated about it. But as the office doors closed behind her and she hurried toward the elevator, Maya couldn't shake the feeling that everything about Blake Hawthorne was far more complicated than it appeared, and she was just beginning to understand why. She thought she'd left Manhattan behind for 3 days until her phone rang at midnight in a Chicago hospital waiting room. Maya pressed her back against the cold hospital wall, phone pressed to her ear as Blake's voice cut through the sterile silence of the ICU corridor. It was past midnight, and her grandfather had finally fallen asleep after hours of confusion and fear. She'd been sitting in the same plastic chair for 6 hours, still wearing the clothes she'd thrown on before catching his private jet that morning. Maya, I know it's late, but I need to ask you something. His voice sounded different, tired, almost uncertain. Maya glanced around the empty hallway, making sure she wouldn't disturb any patients. Of course. What's wrong? The Peterson contract. You were right about everything. There was a pause, the sound of papers rustling. My legal team spent all day going through your notes. We pulled out of the deal an hour ago. Despite her exhaustion, Maya felt a spark of satisfaction. Good. That project would have buried you the moment the city started playing hardball with permits. That's not why I'm calling. Another pause. Maya, how did you know to look for those specific clauses? Most corporate lawyers wouldn't have caught what you caught. Maya shifted in her chair, suddenly aware that this conversation felt different from their usual professional exchanges. There was something vulnerable in Blake's voice, like he was trying to solve a puzzle, and she held the missing piece. My grandfather, she said quietly, glancing toward his room. Before the dementia got bad, he was a construction foreman in Chicago, worked on dozens of mixed-use projects downtown. He used to tell me stories about developers who got burned by bad contracts, how one tiny clause could destroy a man's life's work. She smiled sadly. I guess I learned to read between the lines from the master. Silence stretched between them. Maya could hear the faint sounds of New York traffic through Blake's phone, while around her the hospital hummed with its own quiet rhythm. How is he? Blake asked finally. Scared? Confused. He keeps asking for my grandmother, but she's been gone for 10 years. Maya's voice caught slightly. Some days he remembers me. Today he thought I was a nurse. I'm sorry. The simple words, spoken with genuine feeling, nearly undid her. Maya had expected professional courtesy, maybe impatience about when she'd return to work. She hadn't expected compassion from the man who supposedly dated supermodels and fired employees without blinking. Blake, she started, then stopped. Using his first name felt intimate somehow, like crossing a line they'd been dancing around since yesterday. What is it? Why did you really call? It's midnight, and you could have told me about Peterson tomorrow. Another long pause. Maya could practically hear him thinking, weighing his words. I was working late going through your research on the Tribeca project. You've been here 2 days, Maya. 2 days. And you understand my business better than advisors I've paid 6 figures to retain. His voice dropped lower. I wanted to know how, and I wanted to make sure you were okay. Something warm unfurled in Maya's chest. She'd spent years being invisible. The granddaughter who sacrificed her 20s for family duty. The temp worker who blended into the background. The woman men looked through rather than at. Blake Hawthorne saw her. I'm okay, she said softly. Just tired. When are you coming back? Tomorrow afternoon. If the doctors say Grandpa's stable, Aunt Carmen can take over from there. Maya. Her name sounded different when he said it like that. Rougher somehow. Take the time you need. I meant what I said about family coming first. Since when does Blake Hawthorne put family before business? The question slipped out before she could stop it. Maya immediately regretted the boldness, but Blake surprised her with a low chuckle. Since my new assistant started teaching me things I apparently never learned. He paused. Get some sleep, Maya. We'll talk when you get back. Blake, wait. She stood up, suddenly needing to say something before he hung up. Thank you. For the jet, for understanding, for… She struggled to find the right words. For calling just to check on me. I can't remember the last time someone did that. Maya? His voice was quiet, almost gentle. Yeah? I can't remember the last time I wanted to. The line went dead, leaving Maya staring at her phone in the fluorescent-lit hallway. Through the window, Chicago's skyline glittered in the distance, but all she could think about was a certain billionaire 3 states away who was turning out to be nothing like the man she'd read about in magazines. Down the hall, a nurse walked quietly past, checking on sleeping patients. Maya returned to her plastic chair and closed her eyes, but sleep wouldn't come. Instead, she found herself wondering what Blake was doing right now, alone in his Manhattan penthouse, and why the thought of seeing him again tomorrow made her heart race in ways that had nothing to do with work. But some questions were dangerous to answer, especially when the man asking them could change everything with a single phone call. She never expected to find him waiting in the lobby when she returned, but there he was, looking completely out of place, and absolutely perfect. Maya pushed through the revolving doors of Hawthorne Enterprises at 3:15 on Thursday afternoon, her small carry-on bag dragging behind her, and exhaustion weighing heavy on her shoulders. The trip to Chicago had drained more than just her energy. Watching her grandfather struggle to remember her name had reminded Maya exactly how fragile everything she cared about really was. She planned to slip quietly up to the 45th floor, check her emails, and ease back into the controlled chaos of Blake's world. What she didn't expect was to find Blake himself standing near the reception desk, talking quietly with Delilah while checking his watch every few seconds. When he spotted her, something shifted in his expression. Relief, maybe, or something deeper that Maya couldn't quite name. "You're back," he said, crossing the lobby in long strides. Up close, she could see the tension around his eyes, the way his usually perfect tie sat slightly askew. "I said I'd be back today." Maya studied his face, noting details she'd never allowed herself to notice before: the slight stubble along his jaw, the way his charcoal suit brought out the silver flecks in his gray eyes. "Is everything okay? You look worried," he finished for her. "Yeah, I was." The admission hung between them like a confession. Delilah, pretending not to eavesdrop from behind her marble desk, suddenly became very interested in her computer screen. "Mr. Hawthorne, you didn't need to—" "Blake," he interrupted quietly. "When we're not in meetings, just—" "Blake." Maya nodded, suddenly aware that they were standing closer than strictly professional. She could smell his cologne, something expensive and understated that probably cost more than her monthly Metro card. "How's your grandfather?" "Stable." Confused, but stable. Maya managed a small smile. "He had a moment of clarity yesterday morning. Asked me if I was still chasing after that boy from high school." She laughed softly. "I told him I'd moved on to chasing after bigger challenges." Blake's mouth quirked upward. Bigger challenges? Billionaire bosses with commitment issues and too much pride for their own good. The words slipped out before Maya could stop them. For a moment, Blake just stared at her, and Maya was certain she'd crossed a line that would cost her this job she desperately needed. Then he laughed. Actually laughed. Deep and genuine, the sound echoing through the lobby in a way that made several employees turn to stare. When was the last time anyone had heard Blake Hawthorne laugh? "Fair assessment," he said, still grinning. "Though I prefer selective about personal investments." Same thing. Not even close. They stood there for another beat, something electric crackling in the space between them. Maya became acutely aware that half the lobby was watching their interaction with fascination. In a building where Blake was known for his ice-cold professionalism, this easy banter was probably headline news. "I should get upstairs," Maya said finally. "I'm sure my desk is buried under contracts and phone messages." Actually, Blake glanced around the lobby, seeming to notice their audience for the first time. "Walk with me?" Without waiting for an answer, he headed toward the elevator bank. Maya followed, her heart doing something complicated as the elevator doors closed and left them alone in the mirrored space. "The Peterson deal fell through completely," Blake said as they rose toward the 45th floor. "My legal team is still trying to figure out how you caught what they missed." "Experience," Maya said simply. "No." Blake turned to face her fully. "It's more than that. You see things, Maya. Patterns, problems, solutions. You think 3 steps ahead." The elevator dinged softly as they reached their floor. "I've been in business for 15 years, and I've never had an assistant who understood my work the way you do after 3 days." The doors opened, but neither of them moved. Maya felt pinned in place by the intensity of his gaze. "Blake, I know this complicates things," he said quietly. "I know there are rules about workplace relationships, power dynamics, all of it. But I can't stop thinking about our conversation last night. About how you make me want to be better than I am. Maya's breath caught. What are you saying? I'm saying that for the first time in my life, I care more about keeping someone around than I do about keeping control. His voice dropped lower. And that scares the hell out of me. The elevator doors started to close, but Blake caught them with one hand, never breaking eye contact with Maya. Have dinner with me tonight, he said. Not as my assistant, as Maya. Maya felt the world tilt slightly. 3 days ago, she'd been just another temp worker struggling to make ends meet in Chicago. Now Blake Hawthorne, the man who dated supermodels and graced the covers of business magazines, was asking her to dinner with the kind of vulnerability she'd never expected to see from him. Blake, She looked down at her wrinkled travel clothes, then back up at his perfectly tailored suit. We're from different worlds. Maybe, he said, stepping closer. But maybe that's exactly what I need. As they finally stepped off the elevator and into the familiar chaos of the 45th floor, Maya couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change. The question was whether she was brave enough to let it, or if the distance between their worlds was too great to bridge, no matter how much her heart wanted to try. She had 20 minutes to decide if she was brave enough to fall, and he was about to show her it was worth the risk. Maya stood in front of her tiny bathroom mirror in Queens, holding up 2 dresses that represented the sum total of her nice dinner wardrobe. The navy blue one was safe, professional enough for a business dinner, modest enough to maintain boundaries. The burgundy one was different. It hugged her curves in ways that made her feel beautiful and dangerous, the kind of dress a woman wore when she was ready to take risks. Her phone buzzed with a text from Blake. Car will be there at 7. Don't overthink this, easy for him to say. He probably had a closet full of designer suits and women throwing themselves at him every day. Maya had been on exactly 3 real dates in the past 2 years, and none of them had been with billionaires who could change her life with a single conversation. She chose the burgundy dress. The black car that picked her up looked like something from a movie. Sleek, expensive, with a driver who held the door open and called her Miss Rodriguez, like she belonged in this world. As they glided through Manhattan traffic toward the Upper East Side, Maya watched the city transform from her working-class neighborhood to tree-lined streets where buildings had doormen and history. The restaurant Blake had chosen wasn't what she expected. Instead of some flashy establishment with celebrity chefs and paparazzi, it was a small Italian place tucked between a bookstore and a flower shop. Warm light spilled from windows, and through the glass, Maya could see exposed brick walls lined with wine bottles and couples talking intimately over candlelit tables. Blake was waiting outside, and when he saw her step out of the car, his expression changed completely. Gone was the controlled businessman from their office encounters. This man looked stunned. Maya. He said her name like a prayer, his eyes taking in the way the burgundy fabric moved with her curves, the way she'd left her dark hair loose around her shoulders instead of pulled back in her usual professional style. You look different, she supplied, suddenly self-conscious. Beautiful, he said simply. You look beautiful. Inside, the hostess led them to a corner table that felt private despite the bustling restaurant around them. Blake had traded his usual power suit for dark jeans and a gray sweater that made his eyes look like storm clouds. For the first time since Maya had met him, he looked approachable, human. This isn't what I expected, Maya said, glancing around at the intimate space. What did you expect? Something flashy, expensive, the kind of place where supermodels go to be seen. Blake's jaw tightened slightly. Is that what you think of me? That I'm only interested in flash and show? Maya studied his face, noting the genuine hurt in his expression. I think you're more complicated than the magazines make you seem. But Blake, let's be honest. I've seen the photos. The women you usually date don't work as executive assistants in Queens. The women I usually date, Blake said carefully, don't challenge me to be better than I am. They don't save me millions of dollars by reading contracts at midnight, or call me out when I'm being an ass to my employees, or make me realize that what I thought was living was just existing. A waiter appeared with wine, giving Maya a moment to process Blake's words. When they were alone again, he leaned forward, his voice dropping to that intimate tone that made her pulse race. Maya, I need you to understand something. Those women you've seen in the tabloids, they were distractions. Beautiful, accomplished distractions, but that's all they were. None of them ever made me want to be the kind of man worth loving. And I do? You make me want to be the kind of man your grandfather would approve of. The kind who shows up not because he has to, but because he can't imagine being anywhere else. Maya felt her careful walls beginning to crumble. Blake, I know this is crazy, he continued, reaching across the table to cover her hand with his. The touch sent electricity shooting up her arm. I know we've known each other for less than a week. I know I'm your boss and this complicates everything. But Maya, I can't pretend I don't feel this. Feel what? Like I've been sleepwalking for 37 years and you're the first thing that's made me want to wake up. Maya stared at their joined hands. His larger, tanned from weekend sailing, wearing a watch that cost more than her annual salary. Hers smaller, with a tiny scar from helping her grandfather fix a fence last summer. Two different worlds, touching across a candlelit table in a small Italian restaurant where the owner's grandmother had probably served the same recipes for 50 years. This is insane, she whispered. Completely. You could have anyone. I don't want anyone. I want you. The words hung between them like a bridge waiting to be crossed. Maya thought about her small apartment, her student loans, her grandfather who needed care, and an aunt who worked double shifts to pay for it. Then she looked at Blake, really looked at him, and saw something she hadn't expected to find in a billionaire's eyes. Hope, vulnerability, the same scared excitement she felt in her own chest. Okay, she said quietly. Okay. Let's see what happens when a girl from Chicago falls for a man who owns half of Manhattan. Blake's smile was brilliant, transforming his entire face. Maya Rodriguez, you have no idea what you've just started. But as the evening unfolded around them, sharing stories over pasta, laughing until other diners turned to look, talking until the restaurant began closing around them, Maya realized that maybe, just maybe, she was exactly where she belonged. Even if it scared her more than anything she'd ever done in her life. She thought the hardest part would be admitting her feelings, until Monday morning brought reality crashing back with the force of a Manhattan thunderstorm. Maya stepped off the elevator at 8:15 a.m., still glowing from a weekend that felt like a dream. After dinner Friday night, Blake had walked her through Central Park, talking until the city lights blurred around them like stars. Saturday he'd shown up at her Queens apartment with coffee and bagels, sitting on her tiny fire escape while she told him stories about growing up with her grandfather. Sunday they'd spent hours in his penthouse library, not the showpiece Maya expected, but a real room filled with worn books and comfortable chairs, where Blake admitted he went when the pressure of his empire became too much. Now back in the familiar chaos of Hawthorne Enterprises, Maya felt the weight of what they'd started settling over her like morning fog. The elevator doors opened to reveal Delilah already at her desk. But she wasn't alone. A stunning blonde in a cream-colored designer suit stood beside her, tapping perfectly manicured nails against the marble surface with obvious impatience. Finally, the woman said, turning as Maya approached. You must be the new assistant. I'm Scarlett Winters. She extended a hand with the confidence of someone accustomed to being recognized. Blake's friend. Maya knew that name. Scarlett Winters. Supermodel, socialite. The woman who'd been photographed with Blake at last month's Met Gala benefit. The woman whose Instagram account Maya definitely hadn't stalked after their first dinner. Maya Rodriguez, she replied, shaking Scarlett's hand and noting the way the woman's eyes assessed everything from Maya's department store blazer to her sensible shoes. Mr. Hawthorne is expecting you? Scarlett's laugh was like wind chimes, beautiful and slightly sharp. Blake doesn't expect me, darling. I simply arrive. We have that kind of relationship. Before Maya could respond, Blake's office doors opened and he stepped out, stopping short when he saw Scarlett. Something flickered across his face. Surprise, then something that looked almost like annoyance. Scarlett, what are you doing here? Surprised to see me? Scarlett moved toward him with practiced grace, her hand trailing along his arm in a gesture that spoke of intimate familiarity. I was in the neighborhood after my Vogue shoot. Thought we could grab lunch, talk about the Hampton Charity Gala next weekend. You know the one where I'm supposed to be your date? Maya felt something cold settle in her stomach. The Hampton Charity Gala. She'd seen it on Blake's calendar. She'd assumed it was business. Blake's eyes found Maya's over Scarlett's shoulder, and she saw something there. Regret, maybe, or frustration. But he didn't correct Scarlett's assumption. He didn't say anything at all. Of course, he said finally. Why don't we discuss it in my office? As they disappeared behind the oak doors, Maya sank into her desk chair, her hands trembling slightly as she powered up her computer. The weekend suddenly felt like a mirage. Too beautiful, too perfect to be real. This was reality. Blake Hawthorne moved in a world of charity galas and supermodel dates, while Maya Rodriguez filed his contracts and answered his phones. An hour later, Scarlett emerged from Blake's office looking satisfied in the way of someone who'd gotten exactly what she wanted. She paused at Maya's desk, her smile sharp as a blade. "You know," she said conversationally, "Blake goes through assistants quickly, usually when they start thinking they're more important than they actually are." Her voice was sugar-sweet, but her eyes were cold. Just some friendly advice. Maya lifted her chin, meeting Scarlett's gaze steadily. "Thank you for the concern. I'll keep that in mind." After Scarlett left, the office felt different, charged with tension that made Maya's skin crawl. When Blake emerged an hour later, he looked like the controlled businessman she'd first met, all traces of the vulnerable man from the weekend carefully locked away. "Maya, could I see you in my office?" She followed him inside, noting how he didn't quite meet her eyes as he closed the door. "About this weekend, Mr. Hawthorne," Maya interrupted, the formal title feeling like armor. "You don't owe me any explanations, I understand the situation. Do you?" He turned to face her and Maya saw conflict warring in his expression. "Because I'm not sure I do. You have obligations. A life that existed long before I walked into this office, I get it. Maya, it's not that simple." "Isn't it?" She fought to keep her voice steady. "Blake, what happened this weekend was wonderful, but maybe Scarlett is right. Maybe I was thinking I was more important than I actually am." Blake's jaw tightened. "She said that to you? It doesn't matter what she said?" Maya straightened her shoulders. "What matters is that you have a charity gala to attend with a beautiful woman who fits into your world perfectly, and I have contracts to review and phones to answer. Maya, I need to get back to work, Mr. Hawthorne. The Peterson replacement contracts are on your desk, and you have a conference call with the zoning committee at 2. For a moment, Blake just stared at her, and Maya saw something that looked like pain flash across his features. Then his professional mask slipped back into place. "Of course. Thank you, Miss Rodriguez." As Maya returned to her desk, she told herself this was better, cleaner. Professional relationships stayed professional, and hearts stayed protected. But as she buried herself in spreadsheets and phone calls, she couldn't shake the feeling that she just walked away from something that could have changed everything. And from the way Blake avoided her eyes for the rest of the day, she suspected he felt the exact same way. She never expected to find him sitting alone in his office at midnight, but sometimes the most powerful men are the loneliest of all. Maya had forgotten her phone charger at her desk, a simple mistake that brought her back to the 45th floor long after the building had emptied. The security guard knew her by now, the assistant who worked late, who cared about details that others missed. He waved her through with a tired smile, and Maya rode the elevator up through floors of darkened offices and empty conference rooms. The executive floor was bathed in shadows, lit only by the glow of emergency exit signs and the city lights streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows. Maya expected to grab her charger and leave, but as she passed Blake's office, she noticed light seeping under the oak doors. She knocked softly. "Blake, it's Maya. Come in." She found him slumped in his leather chair, tie discarded, shirt sleeves rolled up, staring out at the Manhattan skyline with a glass of whiskey in his hand. The confident billionaire was gone, replaced by a man who looked exhausted in ways that had nothing to do with work. "You're working late," Maya said, though she could see no papers on his desk, no computer screen glowing with spreadsheets. "I'm not working." Blake's voice was rough, different. "I'm thinking. Badly." Maya hesitated in the doorway. 3 days had passed since their conversation about Scarlett and the charity gala. 3 days of careful professionalism, of avoiding eye contact, of pretending that weekend in his library had never happened. But seeing him like this, vulnerable and alone, shattered her resolve to keep things strictly business. "Can I sit?" Blake gestured to the chair across from his desk. Maya settled into it, noting the way the city lights played across his features, highlighting the tension around his eyes. "How was the gala?" she asked quietly. Blake's laugh was bitter. "Perfect. Absolutely perfect. Scarlett looked stunning. I made all the right speeches, wrote all the appropriate checks. Everyone said we made a beautiful couple." He took a sip of whiskey. "It was everything it was supposed to be. But I spent the entire night thinking about a woman in a burgundy dress who makes me laugh until I forget why I built all these walls in the first place." Maya's heart stopped. "Blake, do you know what Scarlett said to me tonight, Maya? She said we should make it official. Get engaged. She's got the whole thing planned out. Spring wedding in the Hamptons, reception at her family's estate, guest list full of celebrities and politicians." Blake set down his glass and finally looked at her. "She said it would be perfect for both our careers." "And what did you say?" "I said I needed time to think about it." Because that's what a smart businessman would do, right? Evaluate all the angles, consider the benefits, make the logical choice. Maya felt something crumble inside her chest. That sounds practical. Practical. Blake stood up abruptly, moving to the window. You know what's not practical, Maya. The fact that I can't get through a board meeting without wondering what you'd think of the proposed budget. Or that I've started drinking coffee black because it reminds me of making it for you. Or that I haven't been able to sleep properly since Monday because I keep thinking about how you looked when you called me Mr. Hawthorne and put those walls back up between us. Maya stood too, her hands trembling slightly. Blake, you don't understand. Scarlett was right about one thing. I don't belong in your world. I can't compete with charity galas and designer gowns and family estates in the Hamptons. Compete? Blake turned from the window, his eyes intense. Maya, you're not competing with anyone, you've already won. Won what? Everything that matters. He moved closer, close enough that Maya could smell his cologne, see the sincerity in his expression. You won my respect when you saved me from that Peterson disaster. You won my trust when you called me out for being an ass to my employees. And you won my heart when you sat on your fire escape eating bagels and told me about your grandfather's stories. Tears pricked at Maya's eyes. But she's perfect for you. She understands your world, knows how to be the kind of woman a man like you needs. A man like me needs someone who sees him as just a man, not a bank account or a trophy or a business opportunity. Blake reached out, his fingers gently touching her chin. Maya, I've been living in a glass tower for so long I forgot what it felt like to be real. You make me real. This is crazy, Maya whispered, but she didn't pull away from his touch. The craziest thing I've ever done, and the only thing that's ever felt completely right. Maya searched his face looking for doubt, for the careful calculation she'd seen him use in business deals, but all she saw was raw honesty and a vulnerability that took her breath away. What about Scarlett? The engagement? There's not going to be an engagement. There's not going to be a spring wedding or a reception with celebrity guests. Because I finally figured out what I want, Maya, and it's not a perfect life that looks good in magazines. What do you want? Blake's smile was soft, transforming his entire face. I want Sunday mornings in a tiny apartment in Queens. I want someone who challenges me to be better, who isn't impressed by my money but loves me anyway. I want conversations that last until 3 a.m. and coffee that tastes like home. His thumb traced across her cheek. I want you, Maya Rodriguez. Just you. As the city glittered around them through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Maya realized that sometimes the most important decisions weren't made in boardrooms or at charity galas. Sometimes they were made in empty offices at midnight, when two hearts finally found the courage to admit what they'd known all along. But first, she had one more question that would determine everything. She had one question that could either build the bridge between their worlds, or burn it down forever. Maya looked into Blake's eyes, seeing hope and vulnerability and something that looked dangerously like love. The city sparkled around them through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Manhattan's lights creating a constellation that made everything feel possible. But Maya had learned that possibility and reality were two very different things. Blake, she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper, before I answer, before we do this, I need to know something. Anything. When you wake up tomorrow morning in your penthouse and I wake up in my studio apartment in Queens, when you're in board meetings with people who own islands, and I'm taking the subway because I can't afford a cab, when your world expects you to be with someone like Scarlett, someone who fits. Maya took a shaky breath. Will you still want this? Will you still want me? Blake was quiet for so long that Maya began to think she'd pushed too hard, asked for promises no one could make. Then he stepped back, running his hands through his dark hair, and Maya's heart sank. You want to know if I'll get tired of slumming it with the assistant from Chicago? He said, and there was something raw in his voice. That's not what I... It is, though. Blake turned to face the window, his reflection ghost-like in the glass. You want to know if this is real, or if you're just my quarter-life crisis? If I'll wake up in 6 months and decide I miss the simplicity of dating women who don't challenge me? Maya felt tears prick her eyes. Blake, I'm sorry, I didn't mean... You meant exactly what you said, and you have every right to ask. Blake turned back to her, and Maya was shocked to see tears in his own eyes. Maya, do you know why I really started dating models and socialites? She shook her head. Because they were safe, beautiful, accomplished, but safe. They wanted what I could give them. Money, status, connections, but they never wanted me. Not really. Not the man who still calls his mother in Texas every Sunday, or who reads poetry when he can't sleep, or who's terrified that everything he's built is just an elaborate way to avoid dealing with the fact that his father died thinking Blake wasn't good enough. Maya's breath caught. Blake, you want to know if I'll still want you tomorrow? Maya, I've been running from wanting anyone for 15 years, but with you. He moved closer, his hands coming up to frame her face. With you, I want to stop running. I want to build something real with someone who sees me, all of me, and chooses to stay anyway. Your world. My world is whatever I make it, and I want to make it big enough for both of us. Blake's thumbs traced across her cheekbones. Maya, I'm not asking you to become someone different. I'm asking you to help me become the man I want to be, the man who deserves you. Maya searched his face, looking for doubt, for the careful distance she'd seen him maintain with everyone else. But all she saw was openness, vulnerability, and a love so fierce it took her breath away. What about the business dinners, the charity events, all those people who expect Blake Hawthorne to show up with someone like Scarlett? Blake's smile was soft, transforming his entire face. Let them expect. Maya, I've spent my entire adult life living up to other people's expectations. For the first time, I want to live up to yours. My expectations? Be a good man. Be honest. Show up when it matters. Love with everything I have. His voice dropped to a whisper. Think you can help me with that? Maya felt the last of her walls crumble. This man, this brilliant, complicated, wounded man, wasn't asking her to change for his world. He was asking her to help him change his world for them. What if we fail? She whispered. Then we fail together. But Maya, Blake leaned his forehead against hers. What if we don't? What if we build something beautiful and real and lasting? What if love really is enough? Standing there in his empty office, surrounded by the symbols of his success but holding on to the one thing that actually mattered, Maya realized that some questions didn't need answers. They needed faith. Okay, she breathed. Okay. Let's find out what happens when a girl from Chicago and a billionaire from Manhattan decide to rewrite the rules. Maya rose on her tiptoes, her lips inches from his. But Blake? Yeah, I'm keeping my apartment in Queens. At least for now. Blake's laugh was pure joy, the sound echoing through the empty office like a promise. Wouldn't have it any other way. As he kissed her finally, soft and sweet and full of possibility, Maya felt something shift in the universe around them. Maybe love couldn't solve everything, but as Blake held her against his chest and whispered her name like a prayer, she began to believe it could solve the things that mattered most. Outside, Manhattan glittered on, indifferent to the two hearts that had just decided to risk everything for the chance at forever. But inside that glass tower, surrounded by the evidence of Blake's empire, Maya and Blake held each other and made the kind of promises that had nothing to do with money or status or fitting in, and everything to do with choosing love, even when love chose to be complicated. She thought the hardest part was falling in love, until the whole world decided it had opinions about her heart. Maya stared at her phone screen in disbelief, her coffee growing cold on her tiny kitchen table as she scrolled through headlines that made her stomach churn. 3 weeks had passed since that night in Blake's office. 3 weeks of stolen moments and careful discretion. They'd been so cautious. Separate cars to restaurants, different elevators at work, weekend visits to her Queens apartment when the paparazzi were focused on more glamorous targets. But someone had been watching. Billionaire's shocking downgrade. Blake Hawthorne dumped supermodel for secretary. From runway to cubicle. Inside Blake Hawthorne's surprising romance. Gold digger or true love. The truth about Blake's mystery woman. The photos were everywhere. Blake leaving her building on Sunday morning, both of them laughing over coffee at their usual cafe in Queens, her getting out of his car outside Hawthorne Enterprises. In every shot, Maya looked normal. Pretty enough, but undeniably ordinary next to the women Blake had been photographed with before. Her phone buzzed with Blake's number. Maya, don't read any of it. Too late. She set down her phone, her hands shaking slightly. Blake, they're calling me a gold digger. They're saying I'm using you for your money, that you're having some kind of midlife crisis. I don't care what they're saying. Well, I do. The words came out sharper than she intended. These people don't know me, Blake. They don't know that I've never asked you for a single thing, that I tried to pay for my own dinner on our first date, that I insisted on keeping my apartment because I don't want to depend on anyone. Her voice broke slightly. They've already decided who I am. Silence stretched between them. Maya could hear the sounds of Manhattan traffic through Blake's phone, the busy hum of a world that suddenly felt hostile and invasive. Where are you? Blake asked quietly. Home. I called in sick. I can't face the office today, Blake. I can't face Delilah's sympathetic looks or the other employees whispering about whether I'm sleeping my way to a promotion. Maya, listen to me. This will pass. In a week there will be some other scandal. Will it? Maya stood up, pacing her small living room. Blake, your ex-girlfriend is Scarlett Winters. Before her, it was that actress from the vampire movies. Before that, the heiress who owns half of Rhode Island. And now it's Maya Rodriguez, the assistant from Queens whose biggest accomplishment is a business degree from a state school. Maya, I need some air. I need to think. Don't go anywhere alone. The photographers, will follow me to the grocery store now. Got it. Maya closed her eyes, feeling the weight of a life she'd never asked for pressing down on her shoulders. Blake, I love you, but I don't know if love is enough to survive this. She hung up before he could respond. An hour later, Maya sat on a bench in the small park near her apartment, watching children play while their mothers chatted nearby. Normal people living normal lives, unburdened by tabloid headlines and public scrutiny. Her phone had been buzzing constantly, calls from numbers she didn't recognize, probably reporters looking for quotes about her whirlwind romance with Manhattan's most eligible bachelor. Thought I might find you here. Maya looked up to see Blake approaching, looking out of place in his expensive suit among the playground equipment and scattered toys. He sat down beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. How did you know where to find me? You told me once that your grandfather used to bring you to parks like this when you were little. Said they made you feel grounded. Blake's voice was gentle. I figured you needed grounding today. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching a little girl with pigtails navigate the monkey bars with fierce determination. Blake, Maya said finally, what if this doesn't work? What if the pressure, the constant scrutiny, the fact that everyone thinks I'm not good enough for you, what if it destroys what we have? Blake turned to face her fully. Maya, do you remember what I told you about my father? She nodded. He died thinking I wasn't good enough. Not good enough to take over the family construction business. Not tough enough to handle the real world. Not smart enough to make something of myself. Blake's jaw tightened. I spent 15 years building an empire to prove him wrong. But you know what I realized? What? I was still letting other people decide my worth. The business magazines, the social elite, even Scarlett. They all had opinions about who Blake Hawthorne should be and what his life should look like. Blake took her hand, threading their fingers together. Maya, for the first time in my adult life, I don't care what anyone else thinks. I know who I am when I'm with you, and I know what we have is real. Tears blurred Maya's vision. But the headlines, the photos, the way they're talking about me, will stop mattering the moment you stop letting them define you. Blake lifted their joined hands, pressing a soft kiss to her knuckles. Maya, they can call you whatever they want. They can question your motives or your background or whether you're pretty enough to be photographed next to me, but they can't change the fact that you're the woman who saved my company millions of dollars, who challenges me to be better, who loves me not because of what I can give you but because of who I am when I'm with you. Maya leaned against his shoulder, feeling some of the tension leave her body. This is going to be hard. Probably. But Maya, everything worth having is hard. Building my company was hard. Admitting I loved you was hard. Fighting for us is going to be hard too. Blake's arm tightened around her. But I'd rather fight for something real with you than have something easy with anyone else. As they sat together in the small Queens Park, surrounded by the sounds of everyday life, Maya realized that Blake was right. The headlines would fade, the photographers would find new targets, and the world would move on to the next scandal. But what they had, this quiet love that made them both better, would remain. Okay, she said finally. Okay, let's give them something real to write about. Blake's smile was brilliant. Maya Rodriguez, you have no idea what you've just started. But as he kissed her right there on the park bench, surrounded by children's laughter in the warm afternoon sun, Maya realized she was exactly where she belonged, no matter what the headline said. She never imagined that the Metropolitan Museum would become the place where a billionaire would choose love over everything else. But some moments are worth rewriting all the rules. 6 months after their first kiss in Blake's office, Maya stood before her bathroom mirror in her Queens apartment, smoothing down the emerald silk dress that Blake had insisted on buying for tonight's charity gala. The same gala where he'd originally planned to appear with Scarlett, where Manhattan's elite would gather to see and be seen, where their relationship would face its biggest test yet. You don't have to do this, Blake had said that morning, his arms wrapped around her as they watched the sunrise from her tiny fire escape. We could skip it entirely. Disappear to that little bed and breakfast upstate you love. But Maya had spent 6 months learning that love wasn't about hiding. It was about standing together, especially when the world was watching. Her phone buzzed with a text from Blake. "Cars downstairs. Ready to show Manhattan what real love looks like?" Maya smiled, grabbing her purse. A vintage clutch her grandmother had carried, not a designer bag that cost more than most people's rent. Tonight she was going as herself. The Metropolitan Museum had been transformed into a glittering wonderland for the Children's Hospital benefit. Red carpet stretched up the iconic steps, lined with photographers whose camera flashes created a constellation of light against the evening sky. Maya felt her heart hammer as their car approached, knowing that in moments, their relationship would be displayed for the world to judge. Blake squeezed her hand. "Whatever happens in there, remember, I chose you. Not because you're convenient or safe or what people expect. Because you're you." The car door opened and Blake stepped out first, straightening his tuxedo before turning to help Maya. The moment her feet touched the red carpet, the cameras exploded in a frenzy of flashes and shouted questions. "Blake, is this serious?" "Maya, how does it feel dating Manhattan's most eligible bachelor? Are you planning to get married?" Blake's arm tightened around Maya's waist, but he didn't hurry her along. Instead, he stopped, turning to face the crowd of reporters with the confidence of a man who had nothing to hide. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice carrying easily over the chaos, "I'd like you to meet Maya Rodriguez. Not my assistant, not my temporary distraction, but the woman I love. The woman who taught me that success isn't measured by the size of your bank account or the number of magazine covers you grace. It's measured by how much you're willing to risk for what really matters." A reporter thrust a microphone forward. "Blake, what do you say to critics who claim this relationship is just a publicity stunt?" Blake's smile was brilliant. "I say they've obviously never been in love, because if they had, they'd know that when you find someone who makes you want to be the best version of yourself, you don't care what anyone else thinks." As they moved through the museum's grand halls, Maya felt the weight of hundreds of eyes upon them. She recognized faces from magazine covers and society pages, women who looked like they'd stepped off runways, men who owned sports teams and media empires. This was Blake's world, and she was an outsider looking in, but Blake never left her side. When socialites made subtle comments about her background, he responded with stories about her intelligence and strength. When business associates questioned her qualifications, he detailed how she'd saved his company millions. When Scarlet Winters appeared, stunning in white designer silk, Blake politely introduced Maya as the love of my life, without hesitation. The evening's pinnacle came during the auction portion. Blake had bid successfully on several items, but when the auctioneer announced the final lot, a week at a luxury resort in Tuscany, something shifted in Blake's demeanor. "Ladies and gentlemen, our final item tonight, 7 days at the Villa San Michele, valued at $50,000. Do I hear an opening bid?" Hands shot up around the room as the bidding escalated quickly. Maya watched, mesmerized by the casual way these people threw around money that could pay her rent for 2 years. "75,000, called out a tech mogul from California. 100,000, countered a real estate heiress. Blake raised his paddle. 200,000. The room fell silent. Even for this crowd, 200,000 for a vacation was excessive. "Blake," Maya whispered, "that's too much." But Blake was already standing, his voice carrying clearly through the hushed museum hall. "Actually, I'd like to change my bid." He turned to Maya, his eyes shining with an emotion she couldn't quite name. "I bid $200,000 and I'd like to donate the trip to the hospital staff, because the real prize I'm hoping to win tonight isn't a vacation." Maya's breath caught as Blake dropped to one knee right there in the middle of Manhattan's most elite charity gala. The room erupted in gasps and whispers, but Blake's attention was entirely focused on Maya. "Maya Rodriguez," he said, pulling a small velvet box from his jacket pocket. 6 months ago, you walked into my office and changed everything. You taught me that love isn't about finding someone who fits into your world. It's about finding someone worth rebuilding your world around. Tears blurred Maya's vision as Blake opened the box to reveal a ring that wasn't ostentatious or flashy, but perfect, a simple solitaire that caught the light like a promise. "You've never asked me for anything, but I'm asking you for everything. Will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life proving that some things are more valuable than money, more lasting than fame, more real than anything I ever thought I wanted?" The museum had gone completely silent. Maya was aware of hundreds of people watching, of cameras recording this moment for tomorrow's headlines, of the fact that her answer would be dissected and analyzed by strangers. But all she could see was Blake, the man who'd learned to love not in spite of their differences but because of them, the man who'd chosen her not once but over and over again, in small moments and grand gestures alike. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes!" As Blake slipped the ring onto her finger and kissed her while the museum erupted in applause, Maya realized that fairy tales weren't about perfect people living perfect lives. They were about real people choosing to love bravely, publicly, completely. And as Blake spun her around in the middle of the Metropolitan Museum, surrounded by Manhattan's elite who were finally witnessing something genuine, Maya knew that their greatest adventure was just beginning. Because when you choose love over fear, when you choose authenticity over expectation, when you choose each other over everything else, that's when the real magic begins. Forever starts now. 2 years later, Maya still took the subway to work, but now it was by choice, not necessity. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse as she sat at the kitchen island, laptop open, reviewing contracts for the newest Hawthorne Enterprises project, affordable housing development in Queens, her old neighborhood. Blake had surprised everyone by shifting his company's focus towards sustainable, accessible housing, a decision the business world initially questioned, but now praised as visionary. "You know," Blake said, appearing behind her with 2 cups of coffee, still black, still 2 sugars. "Most wives of billionaires don't commute to work on public transportation." Maya smiled without looking up from her screen. "Most wives of billionaires don't serve as senior vice president of community development either." Blake set her coffee down and kissed the top of her head, his wedding ring catching the morning light. Their wedding had been small, a ceremony in the Queen's Park where they'd sat on that bench 2 years ago, surrounded by family and a handful of close friends. The media had expected a lavish affair at some exclusive venue, but Maya and Blake had learned that the most precious things in life were often the simplest. "Speaking of which," Blake said, settling onto the stool beside her, "the Rodriguez Community Center breaks ground next month." Maya looked up from her laptop, her heart swelling with pride and disbelief. The community center, named after her grandfather, a place where local kids could get tutoring, job training, and mentorship, had been Blake's wedding gift to her. Not diamonds or designer clothes, but a legacy that would outlast both of them. "Grandpa would have loved this," she said softly. "He would have loved seeing what his granddaughter accomplished." Blake took her hand, thumb tracing over her wedding ring, a simple band that matched his engraved with the coordinates of that Queen's Park. "Maya, do you ever miss it?" "Miss what?" "The simplicity. Before all this, when you were just Maya Rodriguez from Chicago, and I was just your impossible boss." Maya considered the question, looking around the penthouse that had become their home. It was beautiful, yes, but what made it special weren't the expensive furnishings or the Manhattan views. It was the photos from their Queen's Park wedding, the stack of Blake's poetry books next to her business journals, the coffee maker they'd bought together because Blake insisted on learning to make her coffee himself. "Blake, you were never just my impossible boss, and I was never just Maya Rodriguez from Chicago." She leaned closer to him. "We were always exactly who we are now. We just needed time to figure it out." Blake's smile was the same one that had made her heart skip beats in his office 2 years ago, but now it held something deeper: contentment, security, the quiet joy of a man who'd found his home in another person. "Besides," Maya added with a grin, "I still live in Queens." It was true. They'd kept her old apartment, transforming it into Blake's writing retreat. Some evenings they'd escape there from the demands of Manhattan society, sitting on the fire escape like they had in the beginning, talking until the city went quiet around them. The elevator chimed, announcing their car's arrival to take them to work. As they gathered their things, Blake caught Maya's hand. "Mrs. Hawthorne?" "Yes, Mr. Hawthorne? I love you, just as much as I did that night in my office, that day in the park, that moment at the Met. More, actually." Maya rose on her tiptoes to kiss him, tasting coffee and promises and the sweetness of a love that had weathered every storm. "I love you too, just as much as I did when you were my impossible billionaire boss, and I was your stubborn assistant who wouldn't be impressed by your money." As they rode the elevator down to street level, Maya caught their reflection in the mirrored walls. Blake in his perfectly tailored suit, her in a dress that was elegant but understated, both of them wearing expressions of quiet happiness that no amount of money could buy. They'd learned that fairy tales weren't about princes rescuing princesses or poor girls marrying rich men. They were about two imperfect people choosing to build something beautiful together, one day at a time. The elevator doors opened onto the bustling lobby of their building, where Delilah waved from the concierge desk, and the doorman greeted them with genuine warmth. Maya headed toward the subway entrance, while Blake walked to his waiting car, their paths diverging as they did every morning. But tonight they'd come home to each other. They'd share dinner and dreams and the kind of quiet intimacy that turned houses into homes. They'd plan the community center's opening ceremony, and argue playfully about weekend plans and fall asleep in each other's arms, grateful for the ordinary magic of choosing love every single day. Maya paused at the subway entrance, looking back to see Blake watching her from beside his car. He blew her a kiss, the same gesture he'd made every morning for 2 years, and she caught it with a laugh, tucking it close to her heart. Some love stories ended with, and they lived happily ever after. But Maya and Blake's story was different. It continued with, and they chose each other again and again through happiness and challenge, through ordinary Tuesdays and extraordinary dreams. It continued with the quiet understanding that the best love wasn't the kind that conquered all obstacles in a dramatic finale. It was the kind that grew stronger with each small choice, each shared coffee, each morning when they woke up and decided that this beautiful, complicated, perfectly imperfect life they'd built together was exactly where they belonged. Forever didn't start with a wedding or a proposal or a dramatic declaration in front of hundreds of people. Forever started with two hearts deciding that love, real love, was worth choosing every single day. And for Maya Rodriguez Hawthorne and Blake Hawthorne, forever was just beginning. What would you have done in Maya's place? Would you have been brave enough to love someone from a completely different world? Your participation in the channel is very important. Please leave your opinion in the comments. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the story, please subscribe to our channel and leave a comment below letting us know what you thought. Your feedback and support mean a lot to us. Stay tuned for more exciting stories.